Hello students, today we are going to study about the thoracic sympathetic chain. So as you know that we have nervous system, and in the nervous system you already know that what the nervous system does. It controls and coordinates the different motor and sensory activities, you know that. So we divide this nervous system into two parts. We say that there is a central nervous system, and then we say that there is a peripheral nervous system. In central nervous system, we say what are the components of the central nervous system. So the components of the central nervous system are your brain and the spinal cord. There is another type of nervous system as well that we called as the enteric nervous system also, but the enteric nervous system is related to the gut, but it is part of the nervous system. You cannot exclude it. It is very much connected to the main nervous system, or you can say the central nervous system. So in the peripheral nervous system, what do we have? We have the nerves and the ganglia. And when you say nerves, we have the spinal nerves and we have the cranial nerves. So when we talk about, so here basically what we are going to discuss is the sympathetic portion of the system, of the nervous system. I seldom ask this question to my students that where do you think the sympathetic or the parasympathetic nervous system belong to. It is only the component of the peripheral nervous system, or it belongs to the central nervous system. What happens over here? To which particular division this sympathetic nervous system belongs to? Usually they say that it belongs to the peripheral nervous system, as we know that in the ganglia we have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic ganglia over here, and usually they say that the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system belongs here in the peripheral nervous system, because we have the nerves here and the ganglia here as well. We have the sympathetic chain. In the sympathetic chain we do have the ganglia as well. At the same time we have the parasympathetic ganglia as well, and then we have the cranial nerves as well, and these cranial nerves, they are also dealing with the parasympathetic activity. So basically, yes, that's right, that the peripheral nervous system can have two divisions, which can be called as the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, but you cannot allocate these two systems to just your peripheral nervous system, because the central controlling authorities of these two peripherally distributed systems are located within the central nervous system. And when I say the central nervous system, I mean into the brain and into the spinal cord. Within the brain, what do we have? We have the hypothalamus that controls the sympathetic and the parasympathetic activity of the body. And it's just not the hypothalamus. There are many other structures that are controlling the sympathetic and parasympathetic activities. Rather, there are many nuclei within the brain stem, which we are not going into detail of. Then what happens in the spinal cord? In the spinal cord, you have the lateral horn, which is particularly allocated to the sympathetic activity, or it is also called as the sympathetic horn. In the sympathetic horn, it is allocated to the sympathetic activity in the thoracolumbar region, and it is allocated to the parasympathetic activity into the sacral region, right? So to say only that the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, it only belongs to the peripheral nervous system. That's not right. Functionally, you can say that yes, it is the peripheral nervous system through which it is being distributed, but anatomically this is not correct. It is located both in the peripheral nervous system and the central nervous system as well, and I have told you how. Whereas the enteric nervous system, this is the entirely different story. Here you have the interplay of both sympathetic and parasympathetic activity. So we are not going into detail, but you should know that here in the enteric nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic activity both plays its part. Then we say, okay, what about the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system? How anatomically we describe them? We say that the sympathetic nervous system anatomically is called as the thoracolumbar system, or you can say that it constitutes from T1 to L2, whereas the parasympathetic nervous system is called as the craniosacral nervous system, craniosacral system as well, because it is composed of the cranial nerves and the sacral part of S2 to S4 of the spinal cord. So here you can see what this information is telling you. This is telling you that this sympathetic innervation is being derived from the centers that are present into the spinal cord, which is the lateral horn, and the extent or the participants in the formation of this sympathetic system is constitutes from T1 to L2 segments of the spinal cord. When we talk about the craniosacral system, in the craniosacral system, sacral means S2 and S4 segments of the spinal cord are parasympathetic, same lateral horn. Whereas when we talk about the cranial one, there are many cranial nerves. Here we talk about the nerves. You see, in the peripheral nervous system, here were the nerves, the spinal nerves and the cranial nerves. And from the cranial nerves, there are many nerves which are carrying the parasympathetic fibers. And in those nerves, I'll give you only one example. These are the vagus nerve. Vagus nerve is the biggest nerve of the body. Why I have given you this example is because this is the biggest nerve in the body, which is supplying parasympathetic activity to almost all the viscera in the thoracic cavity, to almost all the viscera in the abdominal cavity, into the pelvic cavity, and that means all the viscera. So it is the biggest nerve, and not only these cavities, but also it gives distributions in the head and neck region as well. So therefore vagus nerve is very important. That's why I have quoted this example. So this was an introduction to what is this nervous system is divided. And then